But I went in and I was essentially told the head of the year had lost her father the year previous. So she had taken a year off. The head of my year, not the whole department, the two of them were sitting there, basically said, look, we don't feel that if you are suffering this bad, that you'll be able to pull your grades around and your attendance. If you can, then maybe you're not actually as upset as you think you are.
Oh my God.
And that was the ultimatum I was given.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to What Makes You Tick. And on today's show, I am very excited to bring to you an absolutely incredibly talented person in Cian Tormey, who is a comic artist. Now, for many people, they would ask the question, what is a comic artist? I remember comics when I was growing up as a kid, looking at Spider-Man, looking at Superman, looking at the Green Hornet, and all these different I suppose science fiction characters, and growing up going, I want to be like them. I remember watching even to the point of Beano, when I used to love Beano as well in its most basic form, right? So I've asked Cian to join me on today's episode, and the reason being is that I've been kind of keeping an eye on Cian for the last 10 years or so. We've known each other for about 10 years when we both worked in an advertising agency, creative advertising agency back in the day, and Cian has gone on to do some amazing work, both in the industry, but now also in the world of comics. And Cian has recently been asked to take up the mantle of drawing Superman. Now, for a lot of people, that is probably the pinnacle of all superheroes. That is the ultimate hero in our eyes. Has been around since I believe the 1930s. Am I right in saying, or 20s?
Cian, don't put me on the spot. Yeah, before our time anyway.
In saying that, Cian is the first person from Ireland to ever be given that opportunity to do so, and I think it's a massive reflection not only on his talent but his commitment over the last number of years and sticking to his roots. So, with that introduction, Cian, welcome to What Makes You Tick. How have you been, my friend?
Great. That was quite an introduction. I'm glad I didn't have to do that. It's great to see you, man. Like, as we were saying, it's been about 10 years since we first met. And I think you were saying we bumped into each other on a street in town, which probably would have been about 3 or 4 years ago. And obviously time now is a flat circle. So the last couple of years don't really exist for anybody. So it hasn't probably felt that long. Although at the same time, I mean, it feels like an eternity, doesn't it? So
it does, yeah. I think it's
everything's been really, really great, man.
That's great. It's good to hear. I think what I'd love to get into and for us to talk about in this episode is really just kind of understand your journey, understand how you got into this world, and as I said to you, like, while people don't know that you're the first, mightn't have known that you're the first Irish person to be given the opportunity to draw Superman, but there's more to you than obviously comics, but it is a world that you love, and it is a world that you are shining in. So maybe why don't we start there? Why don't we start with the ultimate, in that you are now drawing Superman, and maybe tell us about how that came about and then what it entails, because this new version of Superman is going to be very different to, not very different, but it's going to be more evolved in the world that we live in today.
Yeah, so I suppose even just to that latest point, like it's so we've been saying, and even in the scripts that I work from, we refer to the character as Superman, but it's actually Superman's son. So this is Superman has had a son with Lois Lane. He's about 18 years old now. So in this particular set of comics, Superman, for some reason, has had to leave us, right? He's off doing something in some other part of the universe. And so what we have now is a younger character who basically everything has reset. So all of the lessons that Superman had to learn, and the reason why he was such an important archetypal character was, of course, that he was alien to us, which gave them a perfect lens through which to explore what it was to be human, right? Because he had to learn that. So all of the lessons, some of the things that we take for granted, he had to learn that from scratch, which is one of the reasons why it's it's a theme throughout his comics that quite often he is the best of us, even though he's not one of us. But the lovely thing about this son of Superman is the fact that he actually is one of us. So the alien thing isn't there. So there's an extra level to this that makes him something that we can own a little bit more. So he still has to learn the same lessons as his father, but he's now of this generation and he's dealing with the problems that we're all facing now, rather than being a character that has been around for so long, and that, as you said, like we all know so well, there are certain things that you can't do with him. There's certain ground you can't keep retreading. So the idea of having this new younger Superman dealing with new problems that aren't the same as, like, as you said, in the 1930s or 40s, he's relevant to new readers. So that's one of the reasons why this is so exciting. So we've been calling him Superman. In the script, he is Superman, but he is the son of Superman. So
Okay.
that may
And
offers,
so without obviously spoiling it for everybody or breaking any contractual agreements that you probably have in place, but what type of things should we expect from the son of Superman? So in terms of the challenges that he's facing.
So it's I suppose true of his dad and the character that we know, that the reason why Superman makes so much sense to readers is that he faces problems that are of a scale that are just incredible. I mean, he is a superhero, but then he also has to deal with problems of like being an 18-year-old boy. And the reason why this particular series was recently a source of quite a bit of controversy is that he is bisexual in this. So there are things that he has to explore of himself that are true of an awful lot of new readers. So those are the kind of themes in his personal life that he has to contend with, while also trying to like shoulder the burden of being his father's son, which is difficult for all of us anyway.
Yeah.
So so it ranges. Like the writer of this series, Tom Taylor, has this fabulous way of taking relevant current themes and just synthesizing like really simple lessons out of them. So it's quite an amazing thing. Like he can handle the size of the problems that a superhero should face, but he filters it through the lens of somebody who is fundamentally good and can't come to terms sometimes with some of the evil that he has to come face to face with. Okay. So there's some strong themes. Like there's a lovely moment in the issue that came out this week, which is the first issue that I'm drawing, where there's a monster that's approaching Metropolis, and it has been woken up by the bad guy, who's like a new version. It's an old character, but he's being like the new version of Lex Luthor for this generation.
Okay.
So as this monster has been upset and wouldn't obviously be aggressive in its own right, it marches towards Metropolis because it's been upset. And there's a boy who trips in a crowd of people who are trying to run away from this approaching monster. And the boy is saved by Superman and says, "There's a monster coming." And Superman turns around and says, "Just because he doesn't look like us doesn't mean he's a monster, but I'll go and make sure." And it's just this very simple moment. And it seems quite a simple thing to say, but the fact that it's an interaction between Superman and a child, and the fact that these are lessons that we should take to heart, just because they don't look like us doesn't mean that they're things that we can't understand, or they're people that we can't identify with. There's a lot of these little moments where it just feels human, and these are important lessons for new readers to learn, that kind of way. So
yeah, I think there's something that you're touching on there, in that the world that we live in is in the social world, the social media world, is that people make a judgment on somebody by the photograph that they put up there, or by the thing that they like, or by the clothes that they wear, and without actually getting into the substance. My recent episode is very much on that, is where somebody who is very much in the limelight in the social side of things and has a very good following, but behind the scenes dealing with a lot of other challenges and other issues that people wouldn't know about, right? So I think that's something that we can all learn. I think if we learned that a little earlier in our lives, it's definitely helpful,
But also, in a broader cultural sense, Superman is an archetypal American character. He's a fundamentally American icon. And these are things that we're dealing with now certainly the idea of immigration and the fact that people don't look like us and therefore we don't want them in our country. Like these are unfortunate current political things in society at large. So those are also really important lessons to start instilling in the stuff, or in the new kids who are reading these comics. Like these are really important lessons. So it's completely true across the board for the way people behave on social media, but also the way people behave in society. Like,
yeah, I agree with you completely. And like if people choose to go down a certain route or certain path, as long as they're not hurting others, I think that's the most important thing. Is like you do you look after yourself, you do whatever floats your boat, but don't hurt anybody in the way. Manage yourself, and that's including yourself, right? So it's like don't hurt yourself either. One of the things a friend of mine always said to me was like, don't speak to yourself. Only speak to yourself the way you'd speak to your best friend. Like don't say anything, because you'd never tell your friend or best friend something negative, super negative. You'd kind of find a way to figure out an optimistic kind of support or role, or maybe just be honest. But
that's actually, just to touch on that briefly, that's something that I adopted, I'd say about 2 or 3 years ago. I watched a video of an actor who was explaining that this voice that we have in our heads that's constantly negative, like it's not our voice. You don't speak to a friend. You wouldn't, if a friend made a mistake, or if a friend said, oh, I've just done something really embarrassing, you would calm them down and you would talk them through it. You would coach them through it. And yet when you do it to yourself, it's always incredibly negative. And I recently was in Barcelona talking to an old friend of mine, and I was saying that, you can live without that voice. It takes some practice and you have to be careful, but I don't speak to myself negatively in any way anymore. And I did something recently. I think I was making a coffee in the kitchen and I spilled some of the beans on the floor, and I was like, oh, Cian, you idiot. And I went, oh, I haven't said that in years and I'm not going to start it now. So I know it sounds really funny, but I actually started saying, okay, well, I'm going to say that's not good, bud, which is a stupid thing to say. But because it was such an unnatural thing to say, it made me extremely conscious of when I was doing it, which helped me to cancel out saying anything negative again. And I've got myself back on track. So there's none of that negative. It's a dissociative thing. Like you have to literally be your own best friend. So it is about partitioning your brain and your emotional response to things, and being able to coach the part of you that's really insecure through those difficult moments. And it takes a bit of practice, but it does wonders for you.
Why did you find that you needed to do that? Did you go through a time that was super difficult?
Oh, yeah. When we first met, I had just come back from Spain, and I had gone through, I had kind of like bits and pieces, tough stuff growing up. But I had left Ireland to move to Spain because I just couldn't be here anymore. Like I just wasn't happy. I'd had a difficult time in college as well. I'd lost a friend who had passed away while I was in college, and just like really, really difficult time. So everything just kind of heaped on top of me. So I moved to Spain. I was there for 3 years, but towards the end of being there, I got into a really abusive relationship with a girl over there. And for the last 6 months, I think, of living in Spain, man, I don't think I slept at all. I started having panic attacks, but I didn't know what they were. So, I don't know if you've ever spoken to somebody who went for a long time with panic attacks who didn't know what they were. You think you're dying. So I'd have them when I was falling asleep. And then, of course, you'd be shocked awake. And it was dreadful. So it wasn't until I spoke to a friend of mine about this, and he was like, oh, I used to have those, and told me what it was, that it helped me to kind of relax. So when I met you first, I don't know if you remember, but man, I think I weighed about like 7 or 8 stone. Like I was
you were smaller, right? Yeah, you were thin, like
yeah. And but just because I hadn't slept for like 6 months before I moved home, Jer Rowe, who was the creative director and publicist where we first met, I flew home, and I had done my work experience with him when I was in transition year. So when I was like 15, so I spent a week or 2 weeks going in and out of Young's with him, and he kind of like just kind of coached me through like advertising when I was much younger. So my mom actually said she didn't know how to get me back from Spain, but she could see that I was starting to kind of lose my grip on wherever I was. So she actually reached out to Jer and organized a meeting with him. So I met him down in Greystones Beach, which is where you'll always find Jer if you go looking for him, as you well know. And so I asked him for a chance. Like, yeah, you can start tomorrow. And I said, no, Jer, I live in Spain. And he was like, fine, fuck it, start on Monday then. So, and that was on a Thursday. So I flew home, I packed up the meager belongings I had and came back and I started working in publicist. So the whole time that I met you throughout that, like I would be sitting in any of the team meetings with no idea how advertising works. Although that didn't make me the only person in the room who didn't know how advertising
most of us
works.
were like that at the time, Cian. Most of us were like that
I
at
was
the
like
time.
battling to figure out how to sleep. There were times when before I'd come into to work to see you guys, like I wouldn't have slept. I would have been absolutely exhausted. So advertising actually helped me, and working specifically with you and with some of the guys in the creative department helped me understand that like you could find social cohesion and support in just being busy. And I can't speak for ladies, but men need to be busy, and we can do really, really negative things to ourselves, like headspace wise, when we're not. And you'll always find that once we feel a sense of purpose, things tend to calm down. And also, like I was about 27, so it was 26, I think, when I came back. And that's a really good time for guys to kind of settle down. You know, as you kind of come into your 30s, like everything starts to just make a little bit more sense. You're a little bit calmer and stuff.
Yeah.
So it all happened at the right time.
I don't know. Sometimes.
No, you're still doing it.
Yeah. So I'm in the latter step part of the 30s now, but it took a while to kind of figure things out for me. But I do think you're right though, is that it's great that you had that support in your mom who was able to identify it and be able to say, hey, listen, come home. And then also then have that support and jur to be able to go, right, come on, here's an opportunity now, let's take it. But let's just touch back on the comic love for a moment. Where did it come from?
So I had to talk to my mum about this, because you had said that you might ask me, and I was like, I'm not really sure, because I've been drawing my whole life. Mum said that I came into like the kitchen or whatever when I was really, really young, and I showed her a drawing I had copied from one of the Ladybird books, and she was like too convinced that I copied it. But when they compared it to the book, it was much bigger than the actual drawing, so they realized that I'd freehanded it. And so that was like the beginning of it. And from that point on, Mum always bought me books on like how to draw dinosaurs, how to draw this. I don't know if you remember those, like these really kind of quite dry tomes, but it was like start with an oval and then draw a foot or whatever, and there'd be like 6 steps. So I'd copy all of those, and they were probably way too advanced for how young I was at the time. But then when I was introduced to comics, I mean, what kid didn't love the look of Spider-Man? Or and because they were aimed, there were so many of them that were aimed at us when we were children. There's a much broader spectrum of demographics that these things are marketed to now. Like there are comics that are for people our age, as opposed to the new readers, which again, like the Superman still exists. He still turns up as an adult in other comics, but the fact that there is a son of Superman also appeals to a market that I think statistically the comics readership refreshes itself every 4 years.
Okay.
So you do have an awful lot of new readers coming in each time. So these characters have to kind of keep reinventing themselves. Which is why they get that kind of soap opera quality to it. But so we had so many annuals and stuff back then where the art was simpler, and I just copied everything. Everything. And I would go to, do you remember the old pound shops where you could buy those bumper refill pads, and the paper was terrible. It was almost like brown recycled paper, and you draw on that with a hard lead pencil, and you could almost see nothing. It was dreadful. And it would like suck the ink out of the markers, so everything was really splodgy. Do you remember? It was just dreadful stuff. And which is actually important, because I remember there was a comic store in Dunleary in the south of Dublin in the shopping centre. And I remember going in there, and I had drawn the Phantom. Do you remember the Phantom, the guy in the purple suit? Yeah, Billy Zane film.
Zane. Oh my God.
It's a great film.
He couldn't make the superhero work for him.
Yeah, it's good. He rocks that purple suit. But so I had drawn this thing of the Phantom. I brought it into this comic store because they used to hang up fan art on one of the pillars in the building. And the guy said, "Oh, you shouldn't be drawing with biros on that kind of paper. Like, it just doesn't look good. Here, try this." And he showed me a pen. He didn't give it to me, but he showed me a pen that I then went and found. And to this day, that's the kind of pens that I would
Uni
ink
pen or
with.
something,
Now
was
I've
it?
it was like that, right? So you know those ones that like the ink runs off a
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah.
So you can actually ink with it as opposed to a biro, which is quite a gummy ink.
Yes.
So yeah, like over the years now, obviously yeah. So like I don't know if I have. So I work with these. So they're a little bit more specialist with these Copic pens, and
Yeah.
man, they're beautiful. But then on top of that, I've changed the paper that I work on, and I work on this really smooth, creamy textured paper, and it's perfect.
It's
So
it, it's
those,
it's it's interesting, isn't it, to think like comics have been around for decades, right? Decades, and
mhm.
even drawings, like I suppose comics in the early form have been around for way longer than the 90 or the 20th century. But
Yeah,
the
late 1800s, I think.
yeah, so what's interesting though is like our world has changed massively, right? So our world
Mhm,
of consumption has changed so dramatically
mhm,
in terms of the digital world. In one sense, you're able to get your work out there way quicker in terms of showcasing your art and showcasing your talent and your style, which is
100%.
probably what has been helpful for you to create this career that you're now in, right? But and the other side of things, then there's that actual process, that kind of that patient approach to each page, to the
Yeah.
to the framing, to all that stuff. Like, could you maybe talk to that a little bit, and maybe the challenges that you face, because I'm sure there's plenty.
Yeah, it's funny. Like a lot of people, one of the first questions you ever get asked is, like, do you work from a script? Like, what do you? How does it work? And I receive a script like a movie script. Only it's not based just purely by location. The script will be broken down into anywhere between one and maybe seven panels, and it's up to me then to organize the panels based on things like which character speaks first. I have to make sure that the reading order is clear, because first and foremost, like I'm a storyteller in this case, and it is my number one job to make sure that the person who picks this comic up and starts to read it knows the order in which I want them to read it. So the positioning of characters, the using backgrounds to frame them to make everything as clear as possible is that's priority number one. So there's a huge amount of planning that goes into the beginning of it. So like your average comic now is 22 pages. So I have 22 pages of scripts that take, I'd say, about 3 days of like full days of just sitting there with the script and sketching all your layouts out, making sure that everything flows. And then I send that off to editorial to make sure that they're happy with the clarity of what I've done. Those days are exhausting, man. Like, I don't know if you've ever spoken another language, but it reminds me of when I first learned Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of a day, you would be so tired, but it's a weird tiredness because you might physically still be quite vibrant,
Yeah, it's a mental
but
fatigue. Yeah.
it's pure mental fatigue.
Mm.
You are so many of the thought processes that we have and the schema that we have, like they allow us to basically like create runnels that like water flows through it. So there's no resistance to an awful lot of the things that we have to do. When you are required to do something that is so utterly mental for extended periods of time, it can be shattering. So you've got about 3 days at the beginning of each project to break out the 22 pages. But the lovely thing is, in terms of my workflow, and this is something that I was looking forward to actually saying to you, because an awful lot of people don't realize this, and it has been an incredible aspect of this job that I would never have known about beforehand, is that when I've done my layouts and the layouts are approved, I'll take the thumbnail, which would be done really, really small, and blow it up into 11 inches by 17 inches, which is the size of the canvas that I'd work on. So I tighten up the layout. I then was printing it out. I'm not doing that as much anymore, which I can explain in a moment, but I would print it out. I'd throw it on the light box here beside me, and then I would pencil from the printout to make sure that the lines were really clean. And then I'd go in with the inks, and the inks could take the longest part of that time because it's like really fine work with your French curves and all that kind of stuff. But once the layout part of it's done, there are no critical decisions to be made over the work itself. And you are just in pure mechanical flow state for anywhere between 8 to 14 hours over the course of drawing a page. So the last like 2.5 years that I've been doing this professionally, and I had been doing it like part-time around the advertising work for about 3-4 years before that. I put on a podcast. I listen to a lot of like politics, history, philosophy stuff, or audiobooks, and just consume this stuff because you're working and you can concentrate purely on what you're hearing. So it feels like I've been to college 5 times in the last 2.5 years. Like it's
Incredible.
just nonstop. It is the greatest aspect of this job that came as a surprise was just the fact that you just put on something at the start of the day and you move over to the drawing desk, you start to work and you just absorb it because everything you do is just in your hands. Like you don't need to make any more decisions. It's brilliant. It's really, really amazing.
Wow. Is it something that, like you've said it a couple of times, but like you obviously love this job, right?
Yeah.
You're working long hours, but you love it. And it's super clear. It's super clear.
Drop there.
Can you hear me? You okay?
Have I lost you?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, there. Are you back?
You're back. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So slight delay, but it's okay.
Sorry about that.
But I'm just saying there, like it's super obvious that you love your job, and not a lot of people can say that about their roles in their daily lives and stuff. But you're working 14-hour days, like you're working serious work. So like that obviously has to take its toll on you. Has there been a point in this last 2.5 years that you found that it's been a super challenging time?
Many, many times. Plus, on top of that, obviously, as all of us went through those weird peaks and troughs of just whatever COVID was doing to us mentally, like some days were brutal, and you wouldn't even know why, and you couldn't, and that you know yourself so many things about having dips in your mental health. Sometimes you don't know what it's causing it, and sometimes you might be reacting to something that happened a week ago, but you're just getting like the after effects of it then. So yeah, like there's been definitely those periods, but there's two things I always say when people talk to me about the length of the days and stuff like that. I remember when I was leaving my last ad agency and I was talking to a copywriter that I was working with a lot, and I couldn't disguise the glee of leaving advertising. Like I loved working in it, but by the time I left, it wasn't what it was when we were there 10 years ago. Like it is a completely different landscape now. And I remember saying to him, oh man, I'm so sorry. Like I have to stop going, yeah, like fuck you, I'm out of here. Because obviously you're still here. Like, so
what are you gonna do? Fire me?
Yeah, exactly. And he said before he started working in advertising himself, he'd worked in finance. And one of the reasons why he was so zen about working in advertising was, I remember him saying to me, like, however bad this job can be, it will never be as bad as finance. And the juxtaposition is the key to everything. Like it doesn't matter how long the days are in this job. It can't be as frustrating as the place I found myself in towards the end of my advertising career. So that's something that like never leaves you. But then the other thing I always say is I remember somebody saying to me, and I don't know what you think about this, but it struck me in the moment. I remember saying, I'm now going to work in comics full time to one of the people in client service. And I remember them saying, do you really want to do the thing you love, like as a job? And I remember just hearing that and going, I don't know if people realize that the implication in that question is that you're supposed to hate what you do. Because you're not supposed to.
Yeah, what type of fucking rationale is that? That makes absolutely no sense. That makes no sense. We spend the majority of our time in our jobs. We spend the majority of our time engaging with people in our jobs. Yeah, there's tough times. I get that. There's going to be tricky times in every type of challenge, which jobs sometimes are. But like you want to enjoy yourself. You want to have a space that you're looking forward to getting up in the morning and be privileged to be in that position, but you deserve that position if it's something that you work hard enough for. And what people do too often is they settle. They just go, right, I've got a cushy number here, I've got a job that's fine, I don't have ambition, and you know what, society tells me that I'm doing okay because I get a pension. Whereas they're the ones who start bitching and moaning about others and what they don't have. Whereas you get people who are not satisfied with second best, they're not satisfied with settling, they're not satisfied with just a run of the mill role for themselves. They want more, they want to fulfill an ambition, and they go do it. And they're like, those are the people that you want to surround yourself with. They're the people you want around your friendship table, and they're the ones that
Mhm.
will challenge you and push you. And that comment that from that person is, to me, somebody who's never been given an opportunity or never taken an opportunity to be brilliant or to do the best that she can be, or follow something that she's passionate about. Because
Yeah, or another way of like that's
I'm not so
100%
sorry, it
possible.
could be a he or she. I don't know if it's a he or she, but like, I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
well, I actually I can't remember. I just remember the question because it just rocked me on my heels
Yeah.
when I heard it because I hadn't really thought about it before. But the other implication that I took from it was just like we do work like so much,
Mm.
and like jobs can be difficult, and I don't know how you felt about your time in advertising. For me, it was vocational when I got there. Like it became something that ambition is certainly a word that I would use to describe the person I was when I came back from Spain. Right, I did really well quite fast, and that's what got me through so much of that. Like ambition almost became my personality for a while. Do you know what I mean? Like I remember giving up smoking, and because I smoked a lot back then as well, and I remember giving up smoking and became the kind of person that was like, okay, if I can do that, I can do anything, and just
Mm.
kind of started hardcoring work and everything that I could for a long time. And but I understand for people who can kind of like have this lateral drift into certain jobs and certain positions where they don't like their work, which is understandable, but it's not vocational. It is a 9 to 5, and I don't know what it's like to have to do that, because anything that you do love to do, you have to do in your like in diminishing amount of personal time. But somebody then says, okay, you get the chance to do that thing that you love. Like maybe, okay, maybe you love watching Netflix. If somebody says, oh, you want to do that for your job, they'll go, no, because jobs are awful. Like my experience is that jobs are awful. And therefore, if I take the thing that I love doing in my spare time and I make that
I'll
my
hate the
career,
thing.
then I'll
I'll
hate
hate it.
the thing that I do. And but it's so awful. It's such a, like, what happened that we ended up just hating work?
I think that person is a super exception. But then
Do you? Oh, well,
again,
I hope so.
I'd like to think so, because a lot of and listen, this is anecdotal, but the people that I speak to, or I look to and ask advice of, they're very motivated by the jobs that they do, and yeah, for the first time in a long time, I'm in a role now where I'm really excited about it. But for the last couple of years in my previous setup, yeah, do you know what? Probably wasn't as motivated as I needed to, but I was going through a lot of other things at the time as well. So it was probably the right time to be in those positions, in that situation. But let me ask you this. So you are a positive guy. What is the biggest challenge you have ever faced?
Um, so I mentioned before that when I was in my first year in college, a friend of mine died, like that I had grown up with, and uh, it just ran me off the rails when I was in my first year in college, and when I was in my second year, I was struggling, man, like really struggling, and so like we drink a lot, obviously as a nation, but we drink a lot in college, and
Were
then
you
when
were you
you
struggling because your friend passed away?
Yeah. Oh man, it was dreadful. Like it really just destroyed me. And I remember in my second year in college, we had this sheet. So I studied graphic design, and we had this sheet that we had to sign at like nine a.m. It Great in principle, right? It's to kind of try and instill some level of discipline in art students, right? Which is
Roll
it's a bit of
call.
an ask, right? So I would get in at like, because I was coming in from Dorky, so like I would get in at like maybe 9:05, and of course I had the option to be in earlier, but like you'd get in at 5 past. The sheet would be gone, but you'd go in, you'd sit, and you'd go through the day as normal. And I got a letter from the college just the day after we broke for Christmas. So I feel that like that's timed on purpose, and it basically said you have been present for something like 11% of the college year so far, and we'll have to fail you on the fact that you're just not here. And I was like, but I am there. Like you see me there every day. So they said, like, come in and talk to us. So I had this whole Christmas break where I was just like, man, my life had been
Rating.
falling
Yeah.
apart. And I couldn't do anything for the Christmas break. It was such an awful, like they could have stopped me in the college. They could have said something, but they didn't. So I had this sitting on my shoulders the whole way through the Christmas break. But I went in and I was essentially told the head of the year had lost her father the year previous. So she had taken a year off. The head of my year, not the whole department, the two of them were sitting there, basically said, look, we don't feel that if you are suffering this badly, that you'll be able to pull your grades around and your attendance. If you can, then maybe you're not actually as upset as you think you are.
Oh my God.
And that was the ultimatum I was given. And I told them, I was like, I don't think you understand, like coming into college is the only thing that's keeping me going. Like I have nothing else to do. I have nowhere else to be, so I basically had to come in every day and like hit this grade point average, which mine wasn't low. They just didn't want me on the course. I had to come in and prove to them that basically the loss of my friend wasn't actually that bad, and therefore I could keep my place. And I stayed in that course for the rest of that second year and then third and fourth year, and I hated every single minute of it. They were so appalling, and like I look back on it now, and I just think, these people are in charge of kids, and some kids are struggling. Like you can't do that. And
imagine that happened now. I'm sure it is. Dude, I'm sure it is, right? But like, a kid, you were vulnerable. You needed help. You needed guidance. You needed somebody to put an arm around your shoulder and say, "Listen, it's going to be okay, pal. We'll do whatever we can for you." But they had like nearly. They'd already made a decision before you even answered the question.
I think the timing of the letter that was like, you have failed, come in and talk to us, but it arrived after we had broken for Christmas. Like that always struck me as like, it's not like it came from the dean's office or something. It came from our department, and I was there.
So how did you manage through the next couple of years? Because obviously, like to lose anybody close to you is super tough, right? But when it's a peer as well, and it's somebody of your kind of ilk, and like you guys were no doubt planning your futures and your lives and all that stuff and talking about it forever, right? So it's so tough, right? But do you think that was a trigger of a kind of like a after what you heard from the dean or whoever it was in the educational area? Would you think that was a trigger for you to just kind of go down a different path to not potentially look after yourself? Or did you look after yourself, or what do you think?
I think that I probably was a little bit like I think I was lost, possibly even before that. But like I was a smart kid that just couldn't seem to get his shit together, and I think on one hand, I was driven purely by anger of the situation that they had put me in. Now, in fairness, look, I will obviously take personal responsibility for the situation. Like it didn't happen by accident, but there are certain things that like you really struggle with, and you don't know how to articulate an awful lot of that kind of sense of loss. And if you don't know where to go with it, like my friends were fantastic, and the friends I've made, like I made from that time are my best friends now. So, I had a wonderful support group, but also I was clearly burning out. And so I think what drove me was it's funny, like I've come to learn an awful lot of my personality is that once I'm kind of told there's a possibility you'll achieve this, but you're more than likely not going to, I'll do it. Like, once the challenge is set, then it's like 100%. Yeah, no, 100%. And I think at that time in my life, I never would have done it without the ultimatum being set. I'm definitely more like that now. Like I'll just do it because I want to do it.
Yeah.
But at the time being what, like 19, 20 in college and going through that and just like needing more support than I got.
Yeah.
I think it's appalling because, I'm 36 now, and I look back at 20-year-olds, people who are like, I've taught some stuff. I love to teach, and I've looked after juniors coming up in advertising when I was a senior art director. And because I think it's really important. And one of the things that my creative directors Des and John that would always say, even in my reviews, was, Cian, we rely on you to help with the juniors, because like you look after them, and I think we have a duty of care to people who want to excel in a field, but they need people to help them through it. And there were quite a few different points where I just didn't have that, and I appreciate how important it is. So I think I managed to get through that stuff just purely out of I was just really angry. But there was a certain amount of it that you just couldn't get back. But
like and how are you now in terms of like you've learned what was wrong with the system, obviously in the setup. So do you apply what you learned and flip it on its head then for younger people coming through and helping them with their kind of careers and helping them with their direction? And do you see that you're doing that on a regular basis now?
Oh, 100%. I do it all the time. There are people who reach out to me and ask me stuff about how to get into comics or anything. Like, I'll always take the time, because it doesn't cost you anything. And again, like I said, the juxtaposition of the last career to this one really also helps you understand how wonderful this is. Like, I don't know what kind of person I would be if I'd managed to get into comics first.
Yes.
I might also really dislike the work because I wouldn't have anything else to compare it to. Like, I'm forever grateful for the fact that there is a comparison that I can make that really softens the edges of all of this.
Yeah, true. I think you go back to that guy who worked in the finance crowd. Like, he's comparing his existing job with the finance, so it can't get any worse than that. But also it kind of limits your thinking then sometimes, because you're looking at it, comparing it to a time that you weren't super happy with. But you think you're happy now. Well, maybe if you pushed on to something else, imagine how happy you'd be again. So it's kind of trying to look at the sky's the limit type of approach, as opposed to, fuck it, I'm glad I'm out of that situation.
But also the thing as well is that if you have an experience that you can compare this to that was less favorable than the one that you're in, then you're already in a great place. It doesn't quench your ambition. If anything, it spurs you on. Like, if there is a next step, and there should be, like,
exactly. So it's like you've already stepped into a more optimistic and positive environment. So
100%.
Imagine what happens now. Keep going.
Things
keep going, and then you learn about which ones actually are right and which ones maybe not so right. Even more. And
your brain is it's a confirmation engine. So when something goes wrong for you, then suddenly it feels like everything's going wrong. It's because a part of you has made a decision that things aren't working, and then your brain goes into overtime trying to prove that that's actually the case. So this idea of positive thinking and all that kind of stuff, I know it can sound a little bit kind of like, healing crystals and stuff sometimes, but what's lovely about it is that once you are in a good frame of mind, positive things do happen, insofar as certain things can occur objectively, that it depends on how you see them. So, like, things are like, something can happen, but the frame of mind that you are in is what helps you subjectively assess whether something is good or bad. And so once you start to really, as we were saying before, speak to yourself in a positive way, be thankful for the work that you get to do and the interactions that you have with people, then you're also more open to the idea of an opportunity coming along.
Yeah.
Because you can see it. You're not in this negative kind of spiral, which can be slow at the start. And
I'm sure you're open to it as well. Like, that's
everything.
You're open to opportunity, and I think it's just, you have to be in the frame of mind to put yourself into that position, But
one of the things I learned from the last job was, like, I say yes to everything, because 9 of the things that you're offered never happen. So just say yes, and amazing things come to you, and they fall into your lap. Like, I did work for HBO at the start of all of this, where I'd fly over to London, and I did some work with Joss Whedon and guys like that on the TV show that they were shooting over there. And I had no idea how to do that, but I was like, I'll give it a shot and see what happens. And look, if I don't know anything, I can ask and somebody will explain it. And, you just leave yourself open to that, and just so much more stuff comes in through it. Like,
just say yes. Well, that actually leads me nicely on to the next question, is that Do you live by any affirmations or values?
I think one of the overarching ones, and it's funny that we touched on it at the beginning, but this idea of speaking to yourself like a friend is actually something that I really truly do believe is terribly important, because you can tear yourself down, but you don't have to. And the idea that you can live without that negative voice in your head is actually something that most people don't know. And I think it's awful that we have it and that we carry it. That's something that I really believe in. You don't need to. I think you catch it sometimes when you're around people for long enough. You realize just how much negativity people externalize. There's nothing wrong with that, but people don't realize necessarily how much negative media that they're drowning in. Like, people listen to radio shows that annoy them, like opinion radio shows, or they watch TV shows that they don't like, like just chat shows and things. And I don't think people realize just how many hours of the day they're consuming things that they don't enjoy. Like, it frustrates you, and you don't need to be that frustrated. Like, you can find things that you like. So some of the stuff we just do because we've always done it, and they're negative patterns that you can very easily break once you become aware of them. But when you realize how much of it is also coded into your language, there was something that I was listening to, I can't remember, again a few years ago, where I went through like this kind of pretty nice mental health improvement moment, where I realized how much of the language that we use informs the way that we think, because we think in shapes, right? So we talk about going through ups and downs, and we talk about, being on cloud nine or down in the dumps. And we've created this method of thinking where if you're happy, it's just before a fall. Like, all of this is based in the way we speak. So everybody is already predicting sadness while they're having a good moment. And there's no reason for us to think about things in terms of waves and drops. There's no reason for that. Imagine contentment was just like a highway instead, and you're in a car, and the car can range left or right into an extreme happiness or an extreme sadness. But all you have to do is just try and stay on the highway. It changes the shape of your understanding of what it is to just be in a good moment. And you no longer start to predict that it's all going to naturally come to an end at some point, because it always does. And it's like, no, we have such a negative way of thinking that's shaped by the language that we use. And if you can stop thinking those things, or if you can start to use a different way of expressing some of those things, you can really kind of set yourself up and balance things out.
I think there's definitely an interesting view on that, because a lot of that is about your approach to a situation, isn't it? It's about how you are when going into a moment, right? So are you open to hearing what others' dialogue is, or are you kind of closed? And if you're open, you're giving yourself the opportunity to learn. And if you're closed, you're just saying, this is the way it is, this is the highway, or my way or the highway. But I do think that there's an important requirement for us to veer into those sadness routes and into those happiness routes, because some things that are out of our control just cause both, and we need to be able to learn, because when we're in those dark times, that's when we really learn what strength we have, and we're able to find our way back out of it, right? So, and it's when we're in those happy times, they're the points that we super appreciate moments, and they're the experiences that we try to cling on to for forever, right? So it's being able to be in a position that you don't want to have two, like it's knowing that extremes of both are probably unsustainable, or not good for you, because then you don't appreciate them when they happen. Do you get me? So it's trying to.
I 100% do. And these days, I don't know if it's always been like this. It's certainly something that I'm conscious of now. But people have a terrible habit of dichotomous thinking. So we only think of the two extremes.
Yeah.
So you are either happy or you are sad. And of course, that's not normal. But we do it in all things, like you're either right or you're wrong, or it's left or right, or like. But that's not true. And because of that, it's like you always see it when somebody says, for example, like, oh, you've done an awful lot of work, and somebody goes, are you saying I'm lazy? And you're like, no, because I didn't mean the exact opposite of the thing I said. We don't have to just kind of always assume the extreme of the opposite of what somebody said. We do it in our politics. We do it in
Yeah.
our daily lives.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we polarize ourselves like almost accidentally,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting. And I think like certainly when you said like, are you open to hearing other people's perspectives? Uh, when we are in the habit of only thinking about I'm right, you're wrong, it's just another one of these, like we become entrenched in our ideologies because we won't hear the opposite of the thing
Yeah. We
that
won't
we
listen.
believe,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
though somebody might not be saying the opposite or coming from the opposite perspective. They might be coming from somewhere just on the spectrum of options between the two.
Yeah, it's so true. Is it's kind of like what you're used to is the norm. If people are saying certain things that are negative all the time, they're not giving themselves compliments. Somebody does, then they're like, "Hold on, what's the catch?"
Yeah, yeah, well,
what do you mean?
that's also
What do
just
you mean?
called being Irish.
What do you think? What do you mean? I'm nice. What are you talking about? Could you share maybe as a tale or a story or advice that you'd give to somebody now that maybe you wish you had when you were beginning? I ask everybody this because I know growing up and going through life, it's part of our journey, and it helps mold us to who we are today. But I think sometimes we always are that 20 odd year old in our heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
We mightn't physically be that, but in our heads we remember those moments as if they were yesterday sometimes. And what's the kind of piece of advice that you would love to have had, or that you would pass on to somebody now?
I think something new that we haven't already touched on, because like I've used up all of my Zen knowledge now already. But like one of the things that I would say, there's definitely a specific term for it. Um, but one of the things that's really important, I think, is the fact that we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge other people by their actions, right? And that's something that like we all do it, but it's really, really bad. So, for example, if you're driving and somebody pulls in front of you, right? You don't know what they're thinking, but you saw what they did and you hate them for what they did. But if you did it to somebody else, you'd go, "Oh, I made a mistake," because you knew what you were trying to do. And of course, you can't read people's minds, but you can be a little bit calmer about kind of understanding that like you don't know what they were thinking, and so you shouldn't judge them purely by the results of the actions that they've taken, when they may have had, you know, they may have made a mistake, or they may have had like a different, healthier motive. You just were on the receiving end of what happened.
Yeah,
That's just something that like, it's just a really, really healthy way of thinking when you're in a situation where you don't like what just happened. You don't know why it just happened.
I have a thing I do whenever I'm in the car and somebody does something like that, right? They pull across or they cut you off or whatever. And before, years ago, I would have gone, "Yeah, you idiot," and da, 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 da. Whereas now, what I do is I start creating stories. So I'm like,
Okay.
"Oh, that person must have had a really bad phone call. Jesus, I'm
Yes. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
sorry for them." Or, "Geez, maybe they're late for a meeting," or
Yeah.
I start kind of giving them excuses. I start making excuses for them so that I don't react, because I'm trying to go, maybe there's something bigger going on in their world that
That's a
is
great
like
idea.
really, really, really tough for them, and that they did something completely out of. Now, sometimes they can be just arseholes, and
Yeah. Well.
that's fair, right? But for
Yeah.
myself, so that I don't react and build up all that kind of tension, then I'm just like, I'll create a little story for them. And then each story, it gets kind of, sometimes it's a bit more interesting. Like, he got a phone call from his wife, he needs to get home, you know.
Like it's funny, but it's such a healthy thing to do, because now what happens is slowly but surely you replace your reaction to something bad that happens in traffic to
Yeah.
your ability to create like a narrative about it,
A
and that
little
becomes the way you
story,
react.
and it
Yeah,
becomes
that's
like a
it.
little, and then all of a sudden you can go on tangents. Don't worry, because you're driving along. Just remember that guy now. Maybe he's the so
I
you
think
go
that's
off.
brilliant.
Yeah. So that's kind of it's I learned that a few years back, and it's definitely helped. And I try, like, obviously it's in different things as well. Like sometimes people have these things when you're in meetings, is like, don't be on a phone. But for me, it's like, what if there's going to be an emergency, or what if something is happening behind the scenes that he doesn't want us to know about, and or they don't want to know about, but they need to have access to the phone. So like, give them a bit of a break. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
don't be super strict. Like, your expectations of others don't need to marry up sorry, your expectation of yourself doesn't need to be the same for others, you know?
No, 100%.
So listen, Cian, I think that like this conversation, I think we could go on for days, but it's been super interesting to hear kind of the challenges you faced. Also, though, that how you kind of I suppose meandered through life to get to a point where you're now in a world that you're really strong mentally. You've done the work and the processes that need to be put in place to help you get through whatever challenges you faced. And I think it's an interesting point of view to say, right, you go through different stages in life, but the one thing is, like, don't be afraid to ask for help, because sometimes you mightn't get help in the places that you need it, but you might have that friendship circle that can give you the support and love that you need. Let's just say the mic is yours now for the next few minutes. Like, tell everybody, I suppose, what you'd like them to know. Is there things that they can do to get in touch, or like how could they reach out to you? Like, take it away. What's on the horizon for you?
Well, look, for me, as I said before, the idea of, positive mental health and stuff like that, that's important to me. And I don't always get it right. I don't want to sound like I'm talking from a privileged position of having everything kind of sorted out. I certainly don't. But I have like active social media channels that are open. I do my best to respond to everyone, because I understand that. I remember, I tell this story a lot, but I remember going to a post office at one point to try and pick up something that I received, the little docket that says you pick it up at the sorting office was. And I'd never done this before. And I was in the queue. It got to my turn, and I said to the guy, okay, so I'm here to pick this up. And he was like, do you have any ID? And I said, no. It obviously makes sense to me now that you say it, but like, it had never occurred to me. I know who I am and I have this. So like, give me my package. And dude, he blew up. He was like, for fuck's sake, you're the 15th person I've had to say this to today. And I was like, okay, I'm the 15th person you've had to say this to. I am not the first person you've had to say this to 15 times. Take it easy. Like, so one of the things that I'm always conscious of on social media is whoever is asking me something or says something, like, they're talking to me for the first time, even if it's a question I may have been asked 50 times already. So I do my best to really answer everybody as if I have never received a message from anyone else before. Like, just, always kind of try and keep it easy. My social media channels, as you know, they're positive. I don't really want to, talk shit about anybody's work or be dragged into any kind of nonsense left-right divide on any issue. So if anybody does want to reach out to me, the nice thing about being Cian Tormey is that there aren't really that many of us. So I am at Cian Tormey on everything. So please reach out if anybody wants to talk. If anybody wants to talk about comics or anything like that, I'm certainly more than happy to impart any wisdom or lessons that I've learned if they're helpful. So I hope that.
Yeah, that's super, man. I think see what I did
there? Nicely done. Look at that.
Oh my god, didn't even mean to. But no, that is brilliant to hear, and it's great that you're willing to share your time and your advice to others. And like storytelling, a good Shanachie used to say to me, he's like, when you're telling a story, you have to tell it as if it's the first time, but it might 100%. Be your 1,000th time telling it. So keep doing that. And I'm really, really delighted to hear how you're progressing. I'm going to stay tuned to the son of Superman and to understand where his journey goes. But I think your journey is definitely on the up and up. And I think that your honesty and your openness today has been, I've no doubt, super helpful for me, but I'm sure it's been super helpful for everybody else as well listening. So
I hope
this is what it's all about, is talking, and I'm sure we'll get you on at some point in the future. We'll see how the progress goes. Anytime
at all, just let me know. And hopefully we'll get some points in soon as well, when things go a little bit more back to normal.
Exactly. Well, listen, Cian Tormey,
Mr. Bradshaw,
thank you so much, my friend.
I will talk to you soon.